in particular, one person who I don't want to name who claims that they also are an INFJ, and just seeing examples and being like, that couldn't be less like me. But I think all that's kind of wrapped up with two things. One, a general self-doubting, which is my own shit to deal with. Two, a subconscious giving of authority to others, just assuming that what others say is true in a way, so that if somebody says I am this, I am more likely to believe them than push back on it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I see somebody saying I am this, and I am seeing that I am not that, then I can't be the best they mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's going to be a problem for an INFJ moving through the typology world, is
Yeah.
they're going to know either that a lot of people are full of shit when they're talking about their own type, but not feel as though there's any good way to say that, or they're going to be impacted by the contradictions they see in what people say and what they understand about type as casting some doubt on type. One of the two. So either way, it's going to be kind of annoying for an INFJ moving through this typology world. Whereas for me, if like, okay, in my live streams, people come in and say whatever type they are and whatever. I usually don't say anything about it even if I disagree with them. Although, if somebody says something like, as an INTJ, I think meow 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 meow, and I don't think they're an INTJ, then I won't read that thing out loud. But I won't call them out on it on the live stream.
Very subtle use of FE there.
Basically because I'm not going to win that argument. I already know I can't actually type people from the chat. And that sometimes people's, like, appearance, so to speak, in the chat turns out to be very different than their type. Like, I would never have guessed Jonathan Basanti was an INTJ from his banter-filled chats, his making of jokes and stuff, which many of which seem like NETI-style jokes. But he's definitely an INTJ. It's just that that's how he chooses to chat. And so he's only showing that side of himself in the chat. And I also like to chat like that. I like to make a lot of jokes when I'm in somebody else's stream chatting. So I think, oh, that can't be an INTJ. He's too much like me. But that's just because you can't tell anything from chat.
I know. Honestly, Eric, this is the first, like, I think I'd watched a couple of, like, live premieres before on other channels, but this is the Talking with Famous People is the first community, like, chat community I've ever been a part of, and I feel more than half blind half of the time, and because I'm also me, that makes me very tentative to put anything beyond the most innocuous statements out there, because I just can't see. I can't tell how it's going to land, because I can't tell who these people are with the speed that I'm usually able to pick that sort of shit up.
You have no access to half of the data flow, right?
Yeah, it's maddening. It's maddening. I would like to, if I could, I would like to, yeah, it would be awesome to get to know people off of that forum that I interact with a lot, because I love that space. I enjoy being there. There's so much good stuff happening. And I want to be more comfortable there, but at this rate, it's just going to take fucking forever.
Well, yeah, I as a general rule, like to exclude that particular kind of data anyway. So when I'm really listening to somebody, I have a tendency to look down, so I don't have to process any F data. I'm just processing what their words mean, and and it used to be a point of conflict between my ESFJ wife and me, because she wanted me to look at her so she could see my emotional engagement with what she was saying, And she thought that if I wasn't looking at her, I meant I wasn't listening to her. And I said, no, actually, I'm listening to you better when I'm looking down. It makes me feel weird to look at your face the whole time.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I mean, I can see how that would be an easy miscommunication.
So it's an ideal environment for an EHP. Like, I suspect CJ O'Connell's an EHP. I strongly suspect he is.
I like CJ. I really do. Yeah, I think he's doing a good job with the stream, and I
He's
think
great. I love him.
yeah. So ENTP, really, I can see that.
And here's the thing: I've never been to a live stream where I wanted to really hang out and kept finding myself wanting to go back to. When he's streaming, I want to go to his stream and hang out there because I guess in part, or maybe in large part, I don't know, but that is kind of the same group of people. It's just that now I get to be in the crowd down here rather than up on the stage for a while, and I get but also it's because of his of the fact that it's I don't know, most streams are not, it doesn't seem to me, like the streamer engaging with the chatters. Most streams are the streamer talking and occasionally reading the chat thing, maybe.
Yep.
But I think it should be, for me, I enjoy it so much because I get to have lots of little conversations with a succession of people without having to commit to any of them, really.
Yeah, and that is funny because that is actually one of the things that I both enjoy but find super fucking challenging. Is I find it kind of hard just to follow one. Like if I'm trying to have a single conversation, and there's so many other things happening. it's a little bit overwhelmed sometimes, but it really is a great group of people. I mean, there's been a couple of stinkers along the way, and whatever, but it's even the people that I feel like I would likely disagree with about some pretty important stuff. It still feels like a wonderful, relatively safe place to exchange ideas and have conversations that you might not get to have in your regular echo chamber.
And the thing is, what I suspect is going on in some part here is that it's actually incredibly hard to sustain a healthy community that both polices itself and encourages and tolerates diversity of voice. Because the thing is, and that's one of the kind of the nice things about Typology and YouTube also, is you get to see that diversity really happens in voice, not in anything else. It's like diversity happens in how people think and what they say. That's where real diversity is. It doesn't link to any other bullshit labels,
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that I don't know how I feel about that, but I also know I am absolutely not capable of having a debate with you. So.
I'm just saying that, here comes my dad. So let's see what Dad has to say. Come on in, Dad. What's going on?
A 2-second reminder.
Okay.
If you're going to eat I went in today to check for leaks. It doesn't appear to be any, but I'm smelling some sewage, but maybe I'm mistaken. If you're going to have food in the bedroom area, then it attracts A, cockroaches, and B, rats. So just make sure those cans are emptied.
Okay, are there soda cans in there? Or, you mean like soda cans?
Trash cans.
Oh, trash cans. Okay, cool. Yeah, gotcha. Will do. There's signs that we've eaten inside the house.
Which is clearly unacceptable at all times.
Note that the food that we're leaving out, apparently, that is going to attract these bugs and rats, is in the trash can.
Oh my God. And he's always been like that? Like that's always been kind of typical of your dialogue?
Yeah. I mean, he's nicer now than he was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, there wasn't a lot of effort on his part to do any lip service or motion action service to any kind of FE things at all, or FI either. Like he never really cared about my feelings for a second, as far as I could tell, which is fine. It's like the other night when I went inside and he had the closed captions on, and every time Rachel and I go in there, he says, "Go ahead and turn the closed captions off if you want to." This time, because the closed captions were exactly at basket height, so you couldn't even see them shoot a basket without the closed captions blocking it, I took the initiative to turn off the closed captions before he said that. And I got, son, do you think maybe you should have asked? Ownership, son. You know, ownership. It's like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
And that's anti-polar as well. Like, there's never any general rule that can be inferred from a succession of particulars.
No matter how many times. Wow, yeah, that's... And he's an ESTJ? Is that right?
Yeah.
You know, I wondered if maybe one of, my stepdad, I wondered if maybe he was, because that's, I mean, you hear that thrown around so often about the, you know, kind of difficult, not very friendly parent being an ESTJ, but that's definitely not what he's like. He's kind of mean in a completely different way.
Yeah, and the thing is, my dad is, in many, many ways, an absolute saint. But that FE8 means you can expect nothing from him on FE. And this is a great, quick, narrow yourself down to two types question. Is, what question can't you answer? I can't answer the question, what am I going to do later? Unless it's on my calendar and I have to, you know. Then I can answer it. But if I have a block of free time, and you ask me now, what am I going to do later? I have no fucking idea.
Really?
Yeah, I have no clue what I'm going to do. Whatever answer I give you, by answering that answer, makes that course of action less likely to happen. So,
Okay.
The question that INFJs can't answer is, how's your body feeling right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does it feel different than it did yesterday? Are you getting better from that injury you had on your elbow? Or how much better is it than it was yesterday? Is a question that's impossible for INFJs to answer.
Yeah. All right. Well, that makes sense because that is difficult to answer. And it also makes me wonder, so, okay, so just without giving you a long, boring story about my life, over the past few years, for a couple of reasons, I've been trying to actually understand my body, like basically by no choice, trying to embody my body, I guess is the right terminology. And it's been sucky, and I constantly feel like I'm never getting anywhere, and yet that seems to be where all of the answers lie, which is fucking irritating because I don't even really know what it means. Like when, you know, to say how is your body feeling right now, like if I can tune into it for a second, it's just, I don't know. I still don't know how to answer that unless it's something pointed like, well, I squashed my thumb, so my thumb is throbbing, or I have a headache. But if it's not, then it's just a general sort of buzz of activity that I can't make any sense out of, either emotionally or just physically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and when you do understand it, you're going to express it in terms of your fourth slot function. So, how's your body feeling? Well, I squashed my thumb. I took this action against my thumb. When you ask me, what are you going to do later? I answer in terms of my fourth slot function. I go, well, I've got scheduled 8 o'clock, so I'm going to go to that. That's SI. And that means
Right.
what you're really asking is what, when somebody says, well, what are you going to do later today? What they're really asking is, well, what do you want to do later today? And assuming that if you know that, then you know what you're going to do.
Right.
But I don't know what I want to do.
Mm.
Like, when I got up from... First I got up. Rachel and I got up. Then we sat here for a little while. Then I decided I didn't want to get up after all. I wanted to go back to bed. So then I went back to bed. And Rachel tends to just sort of stick with me generally. Sometimes depending if she's not tired, sometimes she'll stay up, but she likes to lie down when I like to lie down and get up when I get up and stuff. So she wouldn't lie down with me. Then after we napped for a while, I got up again. I said, okay, I'm hungry. Let's go get something. Or let's eat. So she said, well, do you want me to cook pot roasts? Because we have these frozen pot roast dinners that we eat a lot of. And I said, no, I'm feeling like drive-thru. And she's like, that's funny. I'm feeling like drive-thru too. So we went through Popeyes. And then we get back here. And this whole time I'm thinking to myself, what do I want to do today? What am I going to do today? Saying, okay, well, I should and want to and would like, hope to make a bunch more of those little shorts because that's playing out pretty well. But nowhere on my radar was follow up with Lady Lou from last night. But when that email hit, I was in the middle of we were listening to that Pavement album, and I was thinking, yeah, I'll set up doing shorts. And that's what I thought I was about to start doing. And then, now here I am doing this. So it's like, if at any point you had asked me, what am I going to do later today? I would have told you, if I had to make my best guess, what are you going to do at 6 o'clock? I'll probably be making shorts.
Yeah.
But I would have been totally wrong because this seemed more interesting at that moment.
Right. Okay. All right. I think, well, like I said, I wish I had specific things that I could point to and be like, well, can you explain this? But I am not that well prepared.
But we only got the last 17 minutes of this recorded anyway, because the first big chunk of it, I had the audio settings wrong, so there's no sound from you.
Oops.
That's my bad. So, how, like, as you're dealing with the typological community, how much do you think it's necessary for you to identify yourself as a specific type, or do you try to avoid doing that?
I personally try and avoid doing that. I will answer if asked, but I don't generally offer. And I don't think that has anything to do... I think that has more to do with the INFJ label, and I kind of see that as a defensive move.
Well, yeah, it's an FE burden.
Yeah.
ENTP is much less of an FE burden because I'm always, because it's much easier to prove you're an ENTP. You know, it's much easier to make the case,
Right.
Because it's all about, look at all these words I can extrovert. So it's easy to demonstrate in a way that having good intuition is not. Intuition happens when the requisite criteria have been met. In other words, when enough pieces of data land on the receiving net such that they suggest the whole, and the intuition coalesces it down and says, aha, this is that, and not these other things.
Right.
So it's harder to demonstrate, and it's a lot more challenging for an INFJ to be convincing about the fact that they're an INFJ. And they also are too much aware of the fact that any efforts they're directed are likely to be pitted against them, as you just want to be one. So what I would suggest is whenever anybody asks you your type, just say, I am one of the soulless ones. And then if they want to get clarified, say I'm INFJ, and say, well, how do you know you're INFJ? Well, I don't have any soul. That'll confuse them. They won't know what to do with that. So I have to be an INFJ.
Love it. I love it. Do that.
It also undermines people's bullshit about INFJs being these like magical empathy lamps or something.
I know, and it's hard because like some of their like the descriptions are so fantastical that even the bits that resonate as feeling true to me are so overwhelmingly wiped out by all of the bullshit that just like I am not wise. Like,
no, but you're smooth. See, that's how it should be described. Instead of all this wisdom stuff, it should be described as smooth.
Yeah.
Mistake-free. What INFJs are most of all is mistake-free. And that links to this whole... It's good to have a negative term for these things, like soulless, because that throws people for a loop. When you're interfering with they're coming in assuming you think you're an INFJ because you think INFJs are hot shit, and you want to be one.
Yeah.
And when you say, no, I know I'm an INFJ because I have all these negative things that go along with INFJ, then it tumbles up their bullshit. So, but the reason is because you're so aware of how your presentation of self has varying degrees from tiny ripples to big waves of impact on other people's emotions and even on secondary interactions. So knowing that you say meow might impact Bob like meow, who then might impact Tom like meow, that's the level of awareness we're talking about, which makes it very difficult for at any point an INFJ to engage negationarily in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to negate without breaking some shit, you know?
Yeah, an awareness of impact. So, question for you. How does... I mean... I guess how does Effie first not have that same problem?
Well, so ENFJ does have the same problem. And from my perspective, they are actually soulless because they don't have any SI, and they don't have enough SI to bridge the communication with me. So it's like, in order for the reason why INFJs and ENTPs get along well, in part, is they both provide both kinds of knowledge functions in their understandings. So an INFJ is operant under this universal framework, but their SI will automatically provide examples, particulars, and such that will help others to understand how the universality expresses in actuality. Mm-hmm. ENTP does the same thing. You go back and forth between SI and NI. I explain general concepts and I give examples. And in reality, it's the opposite. In other words, I start by observing Rachel does this, and then go, I wonder if INFJs do that, or if that's just Rachel. And then I think it out, but the video that comes out, it goes, INFJs do this. And then I give Rachel as an example. But that's not how I actually start. That's not how the epistemological process is for me. So,
interesting.
So ENFJs, though, they don't have that SI component. So they'll come in with their NI truths, and I'll say, well, if this is the case, then what about these particulars? And they'll go, you're missing the bigger picture here. And to me, I just think, you're being sloppy. So, whereas INFJs aren't sloppy like that, because they are able to access, even though it's not willful or conscious, they have much better access to their particulars. Just like I do all kinds of shit, I do stuff all the time. My SE is quite robust, It's just that the relationship with the seventh function is such that it makes it very autopilot-y and unconscious. In other words, the reason I don't know what I'm going to do is because I don't know what I want. And the reason why you don't know what your body feels like is because you don't know how to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Oh, God. Way to call me out, Eric. I mean, you're not at all wrong, but yeah, that seems interesting. Okay. All right. So I have one more question about FE, just kind of when you were talking about how the ESFJ, Kim, I think her name was, when you would communicate with one another. So
that was Candace. That was the lady before Kim.
Oh, okay.
Kim was an ISFJ.
Oh, okay. So, like, I have observed, and I guess I'm curious if it's the same with Rachel. I have observed in myself that, like, when you're talking, I'm looking at you, but when I'm talking, I'm looking everywhere but at you, and that doesn't matter if it's in person or over a thing. I mean, if I'm having like short engagements, I think I'll tend to maybe dip in and out at looking at the person, but especially if I'm trying to like grasp it out of the ether, I'm more likely to not be looking at the person, almost, and I don't know if this is right, but almost as though I need to tune out what their reactions may be in the moment so that it doesn't distract me from trying to get out what I'm trying to get out.
I suspect you play to the level of your opponent, so to speak, which is to the extent that you think the other party is expecting you to be intellectually engaged and robust, as you probably perceive me to expect you to be in this conversation, then you're going to do, that's going to have your FE is going to kick into gear your unconscious fifth slot NE in conjunction with your, to make sure that on TI grounds, this conversation validates as purposeful because it deliberated out some things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so with me, you probably look more away when you're talking than with somebody who's talking about banal, boring shit. Because if somebody's talking to you, oh, Lou, hey, you know, I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to tell you, they've got a wonderful sale on baked beans down at Gelson's, and I know you're a bean lover, and so I thought maybe you'd want to hear. At that point, when you talk, you're not going to be looking away. You're going to be looking at me. You're going to have shifted gears into, okay, this is an FESI person, and so all they want is a certain kind of banal affirmation for what they're talking about, so that's what I'm going to give them. And it's not going to require you to do anything that's not in your conscious function stack, so you're not going to be looking away that much.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Like when I'm making music, I have to listen to something a bunch of times, and then the NI will eventually sort of reveal itself. Like I don't know something until I've experienced it a lot of times. I don't really trust my intuition about stuff that I'm making until I've listened to it 50 times and go, okay, no, I don't like that. But when I'm, say, driving, my NI is automatic, which is if there was one time where there was this car in front of me, and like here, there's this car like here, and like kind of a little bit behind me, and then there was a car here. And I could just get the sense, even though there was no blinker or any indication, just get the feel that this guy's going to come over here. Doesn't see me and is going to come over here. And that I'm going to have nowhere to go because I can't go here. And I don't have, there's maybe somebody on my tail or something. So before he even starts to move, I slow down. And sure enough, he does that thing. And I and get around and successfully, safely avoid an accident. Well, that's my NI in real time performing adequately, as it needs to, because it's in its element. So, in other words, when I'm trying to NI as a form of creativity, I'm trying to get it to do something that is an action kind of role. In other words, I'm trying to get it to sit there and support my action. But it's not fundamentally designed for that. It's sort of fundamentally designed for that car situation. Same thing with you and extroverted intuition. In this conversation, it's like the car situation for your extroverted intuition. It'll be there just fine, and it'll provide you plenty of stuff that you need, because it's the circumstances are asking of your extroverted intuition to perform in its natural capacity.
Interesting. And that probably, I would imagine, contributes to that sort of smoothness that you were talking about.
Yeah, that plus the fact that there's no subjective absolute values in terms of epistemology. So what you're going to say isn't really going to be subject to a lot of critique on TI grounds, because you're not going to try to defend stuff that's not argumentationally defensible, because TI is an absolute value. You're going to want to be right, and concurrently, though, you're going to operationally value, which is to say constantly use, not looking bad, not causing those kind of ripples, or not causing the bigger waves, trying to limit your impacts to those kind of ripples, some of which are going to be, and you can also anticipate how positive stuff is going to potentially impact as well.
Yeah.
There's always that rule. Some people need a pat on the back and some people need a kick in the ass. And you can probably tell which person needs what. And you may sometimes decide you're much less likely to deliver the kick in the ass than the pat on the back. But if you see somebody who needs a pat on the back, that's the kind of opportunity INFJ has to take action that's safe, positive, and the ripples are predictably positive rather than either chaotic or a mixed bag,
Yeah. There was, I don't remember which stream it was on last week, and if I were good at coming up with comments, I would have just commented this on the bottom of the video, but you were talking about, I think you were basically making a comparison with Eric Dorr in the flow state, and it was just this basically dudes, you've got it wrong. It's really just being in a place where you're safe and cared for and allowed to just be who you are. And I'm not kidding you, that stopped me in my tracks, and I've still got that fucking video open somewhere in one of my tabs that I haven't looked at in 4 days, because I don't want to forget which video it is, so that I can go back and clip it, because it was lovely. It was perfect.
If you put a timestamped comment on that video, maybe I'll clip it and put it up as a separate video. So now that you mention it, thank you for that. Because the thing is, I've always had this notion that among the many hours of content, live streams especially, that I put up, there are nuggets that ought to do well as little videos on their own. But the reality is, being an extroverted intuitor means I'm spending the vast majority of my time making more new stuff, and it's difficult for me to go back and deal with the archival aspects of the stuff I've already made.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's a task that probably, not probably, it must get exponentially more overwhelming to even consider doing, because the rate at which you're creating continues to put more into the backlog of stuff that would have to be gone back over.
But additionally, I don't really trust my NI. So it's like, if I'm going to be watching those, what I think is great is not a very good indicator of whether it really deserves to be clipped or not. Because there might be some bit that I think is great because I like a certain turn of phrase that I made, and I thought I was pow pow ninja in my talking or something. But but the FE aspect of it is actually that I look like a dick or smug asshole or something. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm being smug asshole so well. So in that regard, I don't really trust my NI to pick clips. So if you feel
Right.
like that's a good clip, then my NI right now is saying, hey, that's probably a good clip. So if you do end up finding it again, please do leave a comment timestamping it, and I'll clip it out.
All right, cool. I will definitely do that. Yeah, because it really was it hit right, and I can't help but think plenty of other people.
Well, I guess the concept bears explicating in this moment here, which is basically that Eric's where we're saying that to be in a flow state, you can do certain things, I guess, to make yourself more in a flow state, or in other words, to optimize your expression of your type. But my position on it is more or less that the world is constantly oppressing everybody because nobody can ever live up to any example of the best of every attentional manner, right? So if you're an ESTP, in reality, you can only ever expect yourself to be a good ESTP, and the world can only ever expect you to be a good ESTP. But the world expects you to be a good every type. And it views all the various good things, attributes, positive expressions of humanity as vectors independent of the self, which you can score high or low on. And that's a fundamentally oppressive environment for anybody to exist in. So it is the case that if I were in a different world, circumstances would oppressively demand me to be more useful, and they would oppressively negate my talking and ideation and jokes and stuff, that they would oppressively negate me for my lack of sensory deftness, my clumsiness or forgetfulness or something. They'd ontologically condemn me for that, like make fun of me or tease me or whatever. And a bunch of other factors like that would say basically this attentional stack is bad. And that's the worst environment in which you can be in, is one in which you've got people who don't share your function values or your functions and project their own frame biases onto you in a way that's ontologically assaultive. In that context, it's not possible for anybody to be comfortably or optimally their type. And it's also not fair to simply put the burden on those people to change their circumstances. For most people, it's much more complicated than just, they've got all the resources and whatever they need to change their circumstances, but they just are choosing to stay in their current circumstances. That's not reality,
Right.
So, the bottom line is, I may be extrapolating from my own personal experience, but I found for me that what allows me to be an optimal ENTP is as simple as feeling like I have enough reason to believe that I'm not just okay, but good. And for an ENTP, that means I need to have a lot of public, transparent interactions with people, because I will learn from where and when I offend people or get myself disliked and other harms like that, and will grow to be more encompassing of the legitimacy of conflicting values and try to frame it in a way that makes it less ontologically, my frame bias less ontologically assaultive to other people. That happens in this context. I'm optimized because of the context and because I'm lucky. And it is true that it's possible to move from a less positive circumstance to a more positive circumstance in life, but then that's not working on your cognitive functions.
Interesting.
And so it's like, what really needs to happen in the world is for people to have a foundational paradigm shift. In the existing world paradigm, each individual human being is an example of one thing, a human. And they express that example of humanity with scoring certain things on various attributes. But in reality, a human being is an example of one of 16 possible things. And when understood as such, everything makes sense. Then it's like all these questions, well, why is this person being so meh get answered, have a frame in which to be answered meaningfully? If you're saying, well, like, why are they being so meh? Aren't we all examples of the same thing? And yet I see things so differently than he does. Then you try to explain it. Well, it's because of the way you were raised. It's because of your culture. It's because of your meh. It's because of your meh. And none of those answers are satisfying.
Yeah.
And the only answer that's satisfying is it's because the way that person pays attention implies that he expresses his being with certain kinds of attention, expressing as values about himself and others, such that when you guys are talking, the reason you're not communicating is because the criterion party A is using and treating as an absolute, as say an instrumental value, and the criterion that party A is using as an absolute value are different and conflicting than those of party B. And here's the reason why each party A and party B have their respective values. And here are plenty of other examples of people with the exact same meh who display the exact same values in varying shades, right?
Right. It's kind of a wonder between the fact that we're not ever really effectively communicating, either by not understanding each other's frames or by not using words that mean things, which I am absolutely guilty of. I do it all the fucking time. But you put those things together and it's really kind of miraculous we've managed to do that.
Yeah, right? It's kind of crazy that we've ever managed to talk to each other at all.
Yeah.
Without recognizing that quality that I've talked about. And I'm gonna repeat this because we didn't. The first time I said this, it was the bad part of the recording. But
gotcha.
When you're talking about this flow state thing or optimization of self, imagine you're somebody who goes like this, and if you go like this in the air, nothing happens. If you go like this on the table, it makes a sound. But if you go like this in the water, you're swimming. So let's say you're supposed to be a swimmer, and you look at 3 swimmers, and you try to tell them what you need to do is work on your non-swimming functions. In other words, the problem here is not that you're swimming in the wrong medium. You're swimming against the door, and that's why you keep making a bunch of noises and people keep complaining. The problem is that you need to work on your walking functions. Well, no, if you are fundamentally a swimmer, the problem is somebody needs to put you in some water, for fuck's sake. Right?
Yeah. You know, maybe it would be, if you ever feel inspired to do a video on what that water looks like for each of the 16 types, that would be pretty cool.
That's good, NI.
Like, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, that's fucking it right there. But, and maybe this is an indication of TE polar, but I'm like, how? Like, what does that actually, like, okay, how do you do that?
So your water would be an environment where you don't have to use any solvency attention to get problems solved. To the extent that you have to interface, it's always with the social system. You never have to actually solve any ordinal kind of problems yourself. And that you have other people who attend to your taking care of yourself without imposing anything on you. So in other words, it's always a would you mind if I get you a sandwich right now, Lou? And you can just leave it right next to you, but maybe if you feel like eating it later. You want, if the environment were doing that, okay?
Ooh, yeah, that'd be great.
And then also basically never crossing your boundaries so that you can always be enabled to be smooth. You never have to stop being smooth to stop someone crossing your boundaries, because that's why FI is countervalued. If somebody's crossing your boundaries, then you're going to try subtly to cue them, hey, I don't like this, stop crossing my boundaries. And if they don't pick up on those cues, then you have to sacrifice FE in favor of explicit TI. But your TI is selfish. You want your TI to come into play as you want it to come into play. So when others make you do that, they're really saying, use your FI, or turn your FI into TI. Now you can no longer turn your FI into FE. You can no longer hide your FI behind your FE. You've got to justify your FI with your TI. Since you don't think FI in itself is really a justification, you end up saying you're being unfair to me for the following reasons, rather than, I don't like that, it hurts my feelings.
Oh, damn, this is some deep fucking truth here. In the past, 4 months, which, I mean, it feels like I don't want to be one of those victim mindset persons, but for real, the last few years has just been an onslaught of life-changing, mind-blowing stuff that has been a bit much. And in the past couple of months, I've had 2.5 friendships that I had no choice but to terminate them. And one of them was a decade-long friendship, and the amount of time it takes, I would prefer, the whole door slam thing that they talk about, I have done that. I would prefer to silently ghost, and will do what I can to do that, even if it's, and that's not great, obviously, because it's not a very good way of communicating boundaries at all, by just making yourself disappear from things. But it has been, it took a lot, because you're right. There's no way to just be no, that doesn't make me, that's not okay. I don't like that. And yet it's really hard to, I also, because maybe I'm a little bit older, don't want to be the person who's you made me feel this way. You did this. You're unfair. And so I'd rather be able to leave even a breakup situation with everybody feeling good and happy. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get through that is to first do the boundary thing, where I have to put a hard line in the sand and say it's not okay with me that this happens. And that's really awful. I
will say this, by and large, when INFJs do the door slam thing, it's a wise choice. So, in other words, you aren't too trigger happy with your door slamming. Now, there is an exception to this, because if an INFJ is not good at drawing those boundaries in the sand, maintaining their boundaries at in their family life, then they're going to, I'm talking about my relationship with my INFJ friend Corey, who's been in now a marriage with a person who has borderline personality disorder for a long time, decades, and is definitely damaged in ways that he doesn't really recognize, and he's been gaslit, more or less, if you want to use that term. Although I'm not. His wife spends all of her time telling him how awful he is because she's got BPD, and he just tries to fix the situation and he tries to FE the situation, and so his conflict with me then is not an example of a good door slam, but is, I think, atypical, because the problem he's having with me is really that even if I explicitly don't talk about it, or try my best not to talk about it or something, it's almost impossible for there not to be this elephant in the room of, this woman keeps abusing you, and I'm supposed to pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
So it makes it very challenging for him to engage with me, because he doesn't see there as being, I'm sure he sees it as too late to change his life course now, kind of a thing. Even though it's not at all. But
Of course.
and that's the other thing, is like that I'm throwing that in his face all the time, because I've been with Rachel for 2.5 years. So it's obviously not too late to change your life course. And it's not too late to find the right person. And when Rachel and I were over there at his house together, it was obvious to him and us how much she and I love each other and get along great and have a wonderful time together. And the stark contrast between us and him and his wife make it very difficult for us.
Like cooking the elephant in the room.
Right, yeah. So that's a challenging situation. And I don't know what to do about it, frankly, because I really do love the guy and I want him in my life, and yet I'm not sure he's going to be able to be in my life while refusing to address that larger issue.
Yeah, dude, that's fucking complex. I had a very, very different, obviously, but somewhat similar situation with my older sister when she was married to her ex-husband. And at one point, I mean, she's my sister. I would never, like, I will always be there for her. But at some point, I did have to be honest with her and tell her how I really kind of was perceiving their relationship, because I was very concerned for her. And no word of a lie, that relationship has turned out to... I probably won't let you put this part up of the video if you're still recording.
Let me stop it then.
Okay, yeah.